you just tell me a little bit about who you are and
Sure.
what you do?
Of course. Yeah. So my name is David Cohen and great to meet everybody. So I've been in the strategy consulting world, especially in the data world, for all of my career, so over 10 years, and primarily working in large consulting firms in, larger capacities, and then moving on to the boutique space. And now I launched my own consulting firm recently. The name of it is Superposition. And through it, I focus primarily in serving other consultancies and just data nerds like us in general to help us communicate more effectively with our own clients and those that we serve.
Can you talk about how we met and like how you first like got in touch?
Yeah, so the primarily has been, sort of fortuitous, right? Like I reached out on LinkedIn and we obviously have many people in common being in the same data space and AI spaces as a whole. So I just reached out and, we struck it from there. So, part of the journey of starting your own business is kind of putting yourself out there. And as you well know and can relate to, going through that experience has been
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. And I was telling you at lunch, the one thing that I appreciated was I get a lot of inbound these days.
Yeah.
So I quickly have to figure out like what's real. And so I immediately went to your site and I immediately clicked on the mirror board.
Yeah.
I immediately zoomed in, screenshotted it, and sent it to my team saying, we need to do this. Like, this is the level of detail that we need to be doing. And then I immediately said, like, let's talk. Right. And that's it. And for me, it's as quick as that. But I think what I was telling you at lunch is like, I appreciated how much you put out. And now as I've been following you, you put a lot out and it's inspiring for me as like it took me 2 years to get the confidence to put anything out, especially on any sort of like worthwhile cadence. Even after every single one of my marketing friends said that's the only way to grow.
Yeah.
So to do that, this really is great.
The inspiration really came from people that are not in consulting like us. So we are in a space where people buy and expect expertise and thought leadership from us, thought leadership.
Yeah.
The reality is that how that plays out, especially as boutique consultants, can play out in many different ways. Like I take inspiration from photographers, from movie people, from video games, from marketing, from branding, and whomever. So the branding of my company and how it comes across is very intentional because it's sort of a design aspect, bringing the story of who I am, but also what the company stands for from a values perspective and from the kind of people that we want to work with to begin.
Yeah. Can you talk about like you mentioned sort of starting in photography,
Yeah.
but sort of this is what I also like about when I meet other business owners or people is like obsession,
Yeah.
right? And that's actually something that even when we go to hire, I look for people who, when I describe like a new AI tool and they're like, oh, I just tried Opus and now I'm trying 2.5 and
Sure.
and then that's where I'm like, okay, this person's like obsessed and that's what we need. It's totally obvious that you're obsessed with what you do, but it's clear it started with some obsession with like design or sort of visual. Can you talk about where you started there and then talk about how that like actually manifested in consulting?
Yeah, so to give you the background and start at the beginning, I've always been obsessed with two things. One is data work or in general, in its even earlier forms before it was my career. So always have been a huge data nerd, and it's something that was at the bottom of my heart forever. And then also photography and just visual storytelling in general.
And how did you get into like
Yeah,
yeah.
no, that's a good question. So
I don't think I ever asked you because you were like, I'm the consultant and then I have this. And before I was doing photos.
So the backstory is that I actually didn't know what I wanted to get into when I was finishing school. And I originally considered doing a PhD in econ, hence the data nerd.
Yeah.
What I realized is that PhD life was not for me. I wanted to go do something else. So I naturally gravitated towards consulting because I'm a very type A person, right? Obviously trying to challenge myself and, as you said, obsess over things.
Sure.
And that obsession naturally played itself out in the variety that consulting brings.
Yeah.
So having the ability to try different things and having the ability to try different challenges as they come up. So consulting for a big firm sort of naturally happened in that, like, when I went to the career fair or whatever they had,
Yeah. Yeah.
it played out that was the right fit for me. Like I interviewed with a bunch of different companies and it just so happened that consulting was the fit for what I wanted. So it had the variety, the depth of expertise, but also the ability to communicate with others effectively and kind of bring together the world of storytelling, which I loved, as well as the world of data.
Yeah.
Which at the time, to be honest with you, it's not that data wasn't there. Everybody had data just the same as they do now. But data and specifically AI had become much more of an important factor of what we do over the course of my career. So it's been interesting because I feel that I had very good timing, intentionally or unintentionally, in joining the world of consulting and data, so that I could see the progression of where we were when I started 10, 11 years ago to
Yeah.
where we are now.
Yeah. And then can you talk about even within consulting, like how did you find that you were like good at what you were doing?
Yeah.
Because you have a long career, and so nobody sticks with like you could get lucky twice, but like you stuck around with multiple pretty well-known firms
Mhm.
doing, what would based on your resume, a lot of very impressive stuff, and even hearing day to day the things. So like what did you find when you were like, damn, I'm like good at this, or it could be external validation, internal validation, or a specific moment.
Well, I think anybody that's in a consulting firm that is big will relate to this, is that it wasn't always that way. So when you're in a big firm, you don't always do the stuff that you like.
Yeah.
And it only comes with both experience and honestly doing a lot of the dirty work and like, making decks and doing
Yeah.
projects that you don't like to find the things that you do. And just the same way that it goes with any other career or even building your own business, it required a lot of intentional work on my part to find the right mentors and the right people to learn from to do what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say that it was necessarily that like when I started my career, I knew that I wanted to get into data storytelling
Sure.
or I wanted to get into data work or even build my own business and do workshops or whatever. It was more of like sort of happenstance type of opportunities that I ran into the right person who taught me something interesting that I then built into something more using kind of connecting the dots between the different parts of my life that came together.
Yeah.
So the one thing that I'm always reflecting to, especially younger people in consulting or less experienced people in consulting, is that those dots kind of connect themselves, and we have to be open and flexible to getting there. Because for me, like I wouldn't be here if it wasn't thanks to the greatness of many people that mentored me.
Yeah.
I'm extremely thankful to many of them
Yeah.
for giving me the opportunity to learn the things that I do.
Yeah. But in that sense, does it also help you like sort of like break some rules, and now you're like, I know what stuff essential versus what stuff I'm like, that was just because of a time past.
Yeah, and especially in the, world of storytelling and in data in particular, knowing what the rules are the same way that artists would is the only way to break them effectively.
Yeah.
So for example, like, painters,
Yeah.
when they develop a very particular unique style, they are traditionally very talented at the, classical training
Yeah.
as well. It's just that they understand how to break the rules and
Sure.
how to apply that to their work. And the same is true for us in a very like, you know, very related way, in that like
Yeah.
if you do data work or if you do data visualization, storytelling, dashboards or whatever, the only way to understand how to properly move the space forward or how to move it in a way that's truly innovative is to understand not only what the rules are, but also why those rules were built. So
Yeah.
why the structures that we have in consulting work a certain way, why we reflect or engage with our clients in a certain space. And now that we are in this like transitionary period as an industry, the only way to break those rules and to get better at what we do is to understand why they happen in the first place, like I said.
So then can you tell me about like, maybe we can go maybe more specific on exactly like what you do at Superposition,
Sure.
like whether it's a specific client engagement or even just like, I know you're telling me you're preparing for this pitch competition.
Yeah.
You don't have to do 90 seconds, but you
No.
could do a little bit longer.
No.
But maybe just break it down for people on what exactly it is that, hey, if they're doing business with you, what can they expect? But, we're going to have people that are running businesses, that are employees, that work in data or adjacent to data. Like, if you can just talk through that.
Yeah, for sure. So the story behind and the idea for Superposition really came from a realization in working in the consulting space in many capacities, like I said. And that realization was that people like you and I, data nerds and AI nerds, are really bad at showcasing the things that make us good at what we do. And that's true across the board of everything that we do. From a consulting perspective, what that means is that when we communicate with clients, we are not very effective at scoping our work and defining the bounds of that work, as you well know,
Yeah.
but also in communicating effectively across different verticals or in complex human problems that come up in every single project in data and AI.
Yeah.
So data and AI problems are traditionally always human problems.
Yeah.
And what we do is just the application of those human problems into reality. So the realization that I had in my work, which has always been focused on that storytelling piece, is that I could take the many frameworks and the many structures that I've learned in bigger firms and sort of productize them
Yeah.
and bring them to consultancies that are in the boutique space
Yeah.
in data and AI, because companies like ours in the smaller place don't have the bandwidth, don't have the ability, and don't have the manpower
Yeah.
to create constructs and frameworks for how to deliver effectively as a consulting firm.
Yeah.
You know, if you're a consultancy in the boutique space in data or AI, what you focus on is the product,
Yeah.
the value. And you don't really have time to think about the how, like you
Yeah.
just do it.
Yeah.
And what happened is that my expertise, especially in the later half of my career, was always focused on collaborative settings. So building workshops. What those are is effectively gamified activities and structures that enable you and I as a collective to go to a client that has 5 different departments that are all bickering with each other
Yeah.
to say, let's set up a whiteboard here or whatever, and let's discuss the particulars of how to solve this problem so that we can get to the bottom of what the human problem is that we're solving and how an AI platform or a data platform or whatever is going to solve that.
Did you fall into like that work that you did? You mentioned in your second half of your career.
Mhm.
Like, did you fall into that, or how did you even like find that opportunity internally?
Yeah, so what happened is that I used to work at Accenture, which is
Yeah.
a very large firm. And Accenture at the time had, not at the time, but in general, had a very big inclination to do design-oriented work. So human-centered design, design thinking oriented work. And it very much pushed some of that work in terms of not revitalizing, kind of refining technology consulting as a whole through those methods.
Okay.
Because they understood, and this is one of the primary principles that I took from my time there, is that to build good technology and to build good data or AI products, we have to understand the why.
Yeah.
So they were very, very adamant and sort of at the forefront of taking design concepts from product design, such as like the ones that we talked about, to understand and iterate products versus, you know, going from 0 to 1 without actually understanding what we're solving.
Sure.
The reality of what happens in big firms is that they have the manpower to see those projects through from end to end. But the opportunity that I had while I was there was to see that in action. And that really captivated my attention from the perspective of storytelling, because it was a very easy way of translating my expertise in the data field to connect something very visual, which is a workshop traditionally structured in, whiteboard or whatever, and data work, which is very, very lonely, very traditionally separated from the rest of human work, and tends to happen in sort of constrained spaces where they're like, you and I might not work together, but rather sequentially.
Yeah.
So the name Superposition actually comes from that, because the sort of ethos of my company is to bring together the worlds of data work and the worlds of collaboration in a space that is in parallel to each other.
Yeah. Can you talk about what is one of these workshops like actually look like and feel like?
Yeah.
To give you my example, like I've worked for a number of companies and done workshops where people have come in, or we've tried to host internal workshops.
Mhm.
Of course, like we do it almost like office hours almost, where it's like maybe less structured, but we've also been part of workshops that are boring, and I wasn't really good at school. So I kind of like, can you talk about like what you maybe took from your time at Accenture and how you made this boring concept of like a workshop, or like everyone hears workshop, like I don't want to go to a workshop, and like actually made it something compelling? And part of it is even having people be there. You're forcing them to think about something with other people around and like explain their thoughts. You talk about like how you made it unique.
Yeah, so there's 2 aspects to it, right? One is in structuring the workshops from the beginning to always be focused on action. So the main difference between the way I've structured the workshops for Superposition versus traditional workshop concepts is that the workshop is really just a reflection of a bigger framework around problem solving a data problem or an AI problem.
Sure.
So from the beginning, for example, if we were building a project together, it would be, what human problem are we trying to solve through this? And what are the activities going to do to get us there?
Okay.
The activities don't just happen.
So there is this pre-work.
Exactly. There's a significant amount of pre-work that happens prior to the workshops. And then the workshops are really just the reflection of the conversations that happen prior to them.
I think that's something that I didn't grasp when I first talked to you.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, you just like have I mean, I was like, this is a great product. You
Yeah.
just sort of come to the
No,
workshop and you leave. And this is what actually, I mean, I go to a lot of webinars and online workshops,
Mhm.
and this is what you kind of come to expect, which is like a one size fits all.
Yeah.
You
So
know?
so what happens with my workshops or Superpositions workshops rather,
Yeah.
there's a discussion that happens prior to the workshop happening where we define again what problem we're solving, how the activities are going to do so, and what the engagement structure also of the workshops themselves is going to lead to outcomes in terms of the output.
Yeah.
Because the focus for the work that we do at the end of the day is always in producing some meaningful and actionable output at the end. The biggest weakness for the workshop construct as a whole, and this is true for big and small firms,
Yeah.
is workshops don't typically lead to anything. Like you said, you show up to a workshop, maybe even you have a great time, you love it, and then you walk away and forget about it for the rest of your life. So for our workshops, the focus is always to hone in on what are we getting out of this, and how does this move forward a project or a product that comes after. So for a Brainforge, it might be like we need to develop a platform or something. So maybe that's requirements, or maybe that's an implementation plan or a priority list of like, this is going to be high priority versus high effort to make. So the structure of how we get there and how we build those activities is sort of directly conducive to getting to an output. So the way that we structure the workshops is not only to navigate getting to that actionable piece, but also to have the journey of getting there be a process by which the participants, typically a large organization, navigates the friction that they have between them in a way that gets them to see that the like end to end
Yeah.
was part of the journey of getting there. Because typically the clients that we work with don't have that
Yeah.
clear.
Yeah. I was gonna ask actually, like what, I sort of when you mentioned that, all I was thinking about was like when you're in a great meeting.
Yeah.
And you're like, damn, that was a good meeting. Like we had some good like conflict and there's some decision you're made and you left with like, oh, we have a clear set of like criteria to move off of.
Mhm.
Can you, I guess my ask for you was gonna be like, can you talk about something you've seen that occurred after a workshop that sort of demonstrated that like, and of course it can be something at Superposition or even before where you're like, maybe you were even skeptical on like this workshop happened and are we gonna is anything gonna happen? And you saw some like really demonstrated action or saw some really great takeaway.
Yeah, when we work with large organizations especially, and or even moderately sized ones, the biggest problems that we face and that people find the workshop setting useful for is in getting everybody on the same page. And when you have, for example, a CEO that is not necessarily pulling in the same direction that their team is, having them in the same place and talking about the same things helps a lot in kind of navigating that clash, I guess. So the biggest impact for me is always when at the end of the workshop, the activities sort of naturally lead to, oh, I didn't see it from your perspective,
Yeah.
or oh, I didn't think about it that way,
Yeah.
right? And that naturally leads to we should think about the whole process and what comes after in a way that actually gets us to what we both wanted to build.
Yeah.
It's a sort of organic and natural thing that happens in any organization that is beyond startup size.
Yeah.
That there's forces that pull in different directions, and so the work that I do and that we do at Superposition is primarily to bring that world together, connecting the different, as I said, human threads of the things that happen when data nerds get involved in work.
Yeah. And you see that like, I mean, I feel like partly is just being a good third party
Yeah.
mediator to like tough conversations.
Yeah.
Like ideally you would want your executive or someone who's like overseeing to host that, but they are just a third character in the mix. It's
Yeah.
not often someone who's like seen it with fresh eyes and like, what do you have to say? Then you go, then you go, then you go.
So what happens there a lot is that there's two perspectives to that as well, right? Is there's certainly you want an outside party or outside perspective to be able to be the traffic cop, so to speak, to like, direct people into the right spaces. But my clients are actually the consultancies providing the expertise.
Yeah.
And from that perspective, the biggest challenge that you have when you're a consultancy is in having the space to have a conversation that's guided and directed, but still have the room and air to tell people why they should listen to you.
Yeah.
So the focus that I have is in basically playing this weird like double role of like navigating and putting people in the right places so they can freely and openly share what they feel.
Yeah.
But also in giving opportunities to my clients to be able to
Sure.
push their services, to understand like the quality of the work that they do, and to showcase that to their own clients. Because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I work for the consultancy.
Yeah.
And then so the impact obviously is felt in the end result, in that we serve their clients, or my second order clients. But the way that that plays out is that I simultaneously have to play two roles at once, in a
Yeah.
very weird dichotomy thing.
Yeah. Do you find that like, I mean, this is even something I like, we have sprint rituals, right? We have planning, grooming,
Mhm.
all that stuff. But even this sort of meeting or workshop is something that people should probably do on some cadence, right? Or is it, do you find this is like most conducive? Like, I guess my question now that I think about it is like, what are the symptoms that if you were to like, should I do a workshop? Like, is it project related? Is it sort of like, there are some things in the company where like, kind of like, you kind of feel like the malaise or something like that. Like,
Mhm.
you talk about what symptoms of some, like a potential person who should run a company that should run a workshop would be feeling.
Yeah, the biggest problem from the end user or end company sort of aspect is a communication one. So there's a breakdown in being able to move an initiative forward, or to understand what the direction is through a data project or an AI project, or even directionally to understand how data and AI are affecting business strategy. At the end of the day, what you and I probably know, but what we try to communicate to others, is that data and AI strategy are business strategy
Yeah.
problems.
Yes.
And that the big problem that we try to solve for, and that, obviously I try to use the workshops for, is to understand how to use your data effectively. So if you're having issues with your data, if you don't know how to even take on or build AI projects in the first place, or anything along those lines, the thorough line across those is always a communication one.
Sure.
So that's on the client side. For the consultant side, there's obviously a breakdown of complexity, right? Because as consultants, there's the beginning of a project, if you will, the scoping phase, and even from a sales perspective, a challenge of having our clients understand the breadth and depth of what we do,
Yeah.
why it matters from a value perspective, and then why our collaborative setting is going to help them get
Yeah.
there so that they can see it. And the work that we do at Superposition is all about showing and not telling. So that from that perspective, consultancy or a Brainforge, their problem is showcasing to others that the work is worth doing and that it's worth paying.
Yes. Yes.
So the facilitator, or the idea of the tool, is to show that,
Yeah.
to bring that firsthand and say, here, like, this is why we're doing this. This is how we get from point A to point B,
Yeah.
and why it's going to matter when we get to point B that we did this, so that we can build something effectively later.
Yeah, and that's like, we sort of have a couple, we do like proof of concepts.
Mhm.
Of course, we try to do videos like this where we try to show more than like coming to a meeting and like, oh, here's a piece of paper to sign and like ton of money. But it is tough in that some of these things take like a lot of time. Like
Yeah.
data work is getting quicker, but I feel like we're quick. It's not an industry thing to be this quick.
Yeah.
So it's a big commitment,
Well, and I'm sure you know this in the spaces that you guys work in as well. But our clients' expectations keep climbing and keep getting faster.
Yeah.
And in consulting, we've seen this shift over recent years, and it's not new to any of us. But we've seen a slump. We've seen a challenge in the industry and in our ability to directly grow our client base and to communicate with more clients,
Yeah.
because we can't respond effectively to that shift.
Yeah.
We can't show value quick. We can't show value effectively fast. And so
Yeah.
the workshop construct is not new. I mean,
Yeah.
that's existed forever. But for me, the focus on having a workshop construct that is focused on action and value, such that we can show that and build the ability to get people there iteratively, is my grain of sand, or my evolution of how we
Yeah.
evolve the consulting model.
Yeah.
That's really the pie in the sky goal for Superposition as a whole,
Yeah.
is revolutionizing, changing. I don't like the word revolution.
Sure.
Changing, evolving the business model for consultancy work,
Yeah.
so that we can bring the same capabilities that big firms have to smaller ones that also can have a more tailored aspect and impact to companies.
Yeah, that's also very interesting because like when I was coming here today, I was like, you're almost a little bit meta in that you're like enabling other consultants. It's not very often that people think about the infrastructure it takes. The way it typically manifests itself is, okay, we build software for consultants to build time. We build software for consultants to like track projects. but you are doing like a productized service that's like powering one piece of like what people can go to market with in consulting.
Yeah.
It's a pretty narrow thing. Like, I don't know if anyone really understood when you probably explained this. Did anyone get it? Like, or any of your colleagues or people when you explain, you're like, you're selling something to other consultancies, then white label and do them, like,
Yeah, so it actually, I will admit that even I didn't understand my own product to begin with, or service rather. When I started, I thought I was going to be doing data and AI strategy work the
yeah,
same way that I had been my whole career. And what I realized is that in going to market and talking to people about it, it didn't make sense to do the same thing that everyone else was doing.
yeah,
So I honed in on the things that made me unique, right? It's the focus on data storytelling, the
yeah,
focus on visuals, the focus on that collaborative aspect and that workshop aspect I talked about earlier, and having the ability to bring those all together. And at the end of the day, I just had this realization, like a light bulb went off in my head of, it doesn't make sense to sell this to the end
yeah,
user, because as I had conversations with many of them, like in the very early days of my company, I realized that it's not that they weren't finding it effective, it's that they didn't know how to use it.
yeah,
So as you sell that to them, they still need a consultancy or an expert to help guide them through the particulars of
yeah,
what comes after.
yeah,
Because the workshop is nice, but the workshop is just the beginning of a journey.
yeah,
And the reality is that for where my company is, I don't have the bandwidth or the capability to take them through the end of the journey. Brainforge does, or
yeah,
any other consultancy does. So the realization that I had was, well, maybe what I should do is do the workshops as the beginning of a project and then bring on a partner to help them do
yeah,
the other part. But then somebody, very, very smartly and very kindly pulled me aside and said, well, if I'm going to hire you to do that part, why wouldn't I just hire the other company to do that for
okay,
us? And so that really clicked in my head that if that was going to be the case,
yeah,
they were probably correct, and I should just pivot to sell to the consultancy instead.
yes, yeah,
Because the focus is, as you said, enabling them to do a piece of the work, the
yes,
beginning piece of the work, or the strategy piece of data and AI work, either pre-sale or post-sale, as a definition or an enhancer for delivery of work.
yeah,
And that realization came through a lot of conversations with people about the reality of what I do. And it took a lot of intentional thought about the things that I'm good at and the things that I don't want to do.
yeah. It's also, someone described to me as like selling to sellers, like selling to salespeople,
Yeah.
which is sometimes easier because I now can understand how you fit into our package.
Yeah.
And I'm like, cool, there's a trade-off there. And I think that's really important. We're doing a lot of partnership work too. And, that's why it was interested in working with you, because selling to sellers is different than selling to the clients downstream, and and also I will say, like, you're selling yourself short. You have an understanding of like consulting businesses at like a level that they're not just like a consultant in a business. Like, you understand the influences, the revenue models, like, a bit more about, like, you have to know how that business works. So you're more, I don't know how you either were curious, you maybe asked too many questions,
Yeah.
or you're like just like wanted to know how the sausage is made while you're in there. But
Well, one thing that I'll point out, right, to your point, is another differentiator for the work that I do is that I am a data nerd and I have done the work
yeah,
that the rest of my clients do.
yeah,
So it's not only that I can facilitate workshops or build structures and frameworks for getting to a consulting outcome, is that I've done the work. So I understand from an expertise standpoint when something is just bullshit.
yeah,
So like I can call out not only the particulars and structure of, we need to do this activity in such and such way to get to an outcome.
yes,
But when a client tells you, we want to do X or Y, I can, from a facilitator's perspective, call them out on that
yeah,
and take us to the right outcome because
yes.
I've been where you are. I
Yeah.
know when
They're also paying you to do that.
yeah, exactly.
That's the job.
So there's a aspect of facilitation or workshop facilitation that people assume where you're just, as I said, the train conductor or the traffic cop, where you're just getting people places. For me, what I really drive value through is in that expertise, that domain expertise in data and AI,
Yeah.
because I know what it takes to build those products.
Yeah.
So understanding the mechanics of, you said, of consulting in that space and providing expertise in that area
Yeah.
is also what I bring. It's not just the facilitation, it's that that domain area as well.
Have you always been like interested in teaching at all?
So
Have you ever done
somebody,
teaching?
no, somebody brought that up once in a previous role. I never don't have any formal training in teaching or really any interest in doing it, but I seem to sort of gravitate to those sorts of roles. And
Do you feel like you get energy? Like, I guess a better question, and I asked this to our team because I sometimes ask people like, what do you like to do versus what are you doing today?
yeah.
And what do you want to do in the future? And you sort of try to direct it, be like, what's giving you energy?
Mhm.
Do you find like you're like get joy when people are like, oh, I just like
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's a very good point. I never really thought about it for myself, right? Yeah, I probably do get energy from people like sort of something clicking in their head when they do an activity with me, right?
yeah,
Like I'm kind of helping them navigate that thought process of getting to an idea. But it's never been formal for me. It's never been like a thing where like, oh, I want to teach people and I
yeah,
want to get them to learn. And the teaching setting is more for, I think you mentioned earlier as well, to feed the obsession,
yeah,
right? Because I obsess over many, many, many things. And so finding other people that obsess over their own things and helping them channel those obsessions is fascinating to me.
yeah,
It's like something that I love doing.
yeah. That's great. No, I was just thinking, I'm like, okay, you are like basically doing this like iterative teaching. I mean, that's what a workshop is. You're
Sure.
teaching people, right? Like, so okay, that's my last question was gonna be just about like what's next for superposition.
Yeah, so there's a few things. Obviously, like you said, Superposition publicly launched recently, so we're trying to grow into both taking on more clients and helping out other consultancies to grow and do more work themselves. So there's that aspect of it, obviously trying to grow the business and the standard stuff, but also in trying to grow awareness of the brand. So doing stuff like this, kind of getting out there and getting our name out. So posting significantly more regularly on LinkedIn, having a presence out there. By the time this comes out, I may have launched our game show, which,
Yeah,
stay tuned on that front. And the idea is all about getting the name out there and explaining what the brand stands for.
yeah.
And most importantly, in growing our ability to serve more and more clients and other consultancies and helping us all grow through our work.
Yeah, we had a good conversation about brand,
Yeah.
you know, at lunch. So, like, can you talk about how, for me, I came from many startups where brand was like important, where they spent tons and tons of money on brand. But this one was something where it's had to be very authentic. And as we talked about, like people in consulting buy from people. Like, I guess one thing I was curious if you could just articulate maybe again about how you see the development of your brand different than like when you were at Accenture, another big firm, and like kind of the risks that you're taking or even the things you're doing that like, okay, maybe this is I have the freedom to do this and it's cheaper and it's more flexible to do it because you're only, you'd only have so much time and resources.
Yeah, so I'm posting about this pretty over the next few weeks as I like launch the brand. But the Superposition brand was a very intentional self-reflection on who I am and what I do. Like I wanted the brand to not only stand on its own, but also be a reflection of the things that I like and the way that I do my work. So it's a very colorful brand, very engaging brand, heavily incorporates motion, but also it's all about collaboration and bringing people together, which means that, we have to be up on all the memes. We have to be up on all the things that like bring people together, like the way that people actually talk and collaborate. And the reality of the consulting space is, as we were talking about at lunch, it's a very boring space.
Yeah.
And traditionally, from a marketing perspective and a branding perspective, it's one that's heavily focused on expertise, expertise, expertise.
Yeah.
So there's no room to take risks and there's no room to really put yourself out there from a brand.
Yeah, you're right. I think that's the thing. There's no room to take. You don't want to not come across like the expert or something like that.
And the difficult part is in still showcasing that expertise in more creative ways because a Brainforge, a Superposition, we have the room to be more daring, to take
Yeah.
shots in how we brand ourselves, but still showcase our expertise. Like
Yeah.
just because you're, going out on LinkedIn and you're posting memes or whatever,
Yeah.
doesn't mean that you're not an expert at what you do and don't have the
Sure.
capability to talk in a very educated way about the
Yeah.
things that matter to your clients, but you're using a different channel. It's the same
Yes.
thing that, product companies do when they merge into a new channel.
Yeah.
And we are trying to do the same thing, and I am trying to do the same thing,
Yeah.
and breaking into the space through a different channel that communicates to people that want to buy our services, or in my case, other consultancies, that I am serious about my work,
Yeah.
but I care about it deeply and it means something to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I'm finding the same thing where like I look to the big companies as like our competitors.
Mhm.
I look to them on like what's the leading in branding. But I find that like I actually just like you mentioned, I go back to a lot of my friends in growth marketing, product marketing to find out like what is really the cutting edge. And you meet somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, the unfortunate part is that we don't have the like brand presence to just sell things by
Yeah,
themselves.
totally. Like it's not like Nike
Yeah,
putting out like a water bottle
sure.
and now they're like the number one selling water bottle.
So that means sort of by default that we have to take chances to put ourselves out there and show people what we do. So from a branding perspective, for me, what that means is having Superposition be the loudest brand in the consulting world,
Yeah,
whether I
yeah.
want to or not.
Yeah.
And that
You have to.
well, and in order to be seen, respected, and
Sure.
understood by other consultancies, they first have to know who you are.
Yes.
But second, you have to build something that's worth seeing.
Yeah.
So for me, because my work is very visual and very storytelling focused, like I mentioned, I wanted people to be able to see it not only in the work itself, in the output of the work, but also in the branding. So that the branding communicates something about what the company does and what it means for other consultancies
Yeah.
beyond just the like we do consulting for
Yeah.
consultants or we
Yeah.
build workshops for consultants.
Yeah.
It's the brand is loud
Yeah.
because it speaks to a space that we need. We need to communicate effectively. We
Yeah.
need to be able to like actively say and be proud of who we are. And the brand should effectively represent that from a structure standpoint, but also in how it kind of comes across. And so the no, the marketing work is obviously just the planning and realization of that. So there's like a structure to it now. But at the beginning it was just me. So like I wanted it to be who I am and what I bring to the table.
Can you talk about like who you look to for inspiration
Yeah.
for branding? Because and this is the first conversation I've had with someone in consulting that I mean I wouldn't say we think a lot about branding. I think we're in a space in data analyst and AI consulting where branding is an afterthought.
Yeah.
So a lot of these companies start by either MBAs or engineers,
Sure.
either of which have design backgrounds. I don't have a design background, but I like to work with designers, and so we have a great design team. But for me, like as we talked about, like I look to like design agencies for inspo. Is there anyone even in our world that you're like their work is great, or like books or anything and like sort of what you reference that is maybe technical at all, or is it all your inspiration sort of outside of
Yeah.
sort of our stuff?
Most of my inspiration is actually outside of our space.
Yeah.
So it's in graphic design, it's in marketers, it's in brand strategy people that really push the boundaries of how brands present themselves to the world.
Yeah.
I really find inspiration in brands that are able to tell their story about something oftentimes even completely unrelated to what they do by presenting something from a marketing standpoint that catches people's eye.
Mm.
Like, I don't know. It's like when you work or when you go to McDonald's, right?
Yeah.
It's not like McDonald's needs to brand itself or market itself. Like,
Yeah.
you know what it is. But for us, our brand needs to stand for something.
Yeah.
And having that inspiration from like I mentioned earlier, from movies, from graphic design in general, from photography, just more visual methods of communicating value is something that's always been fascinating and first or top of the pile for me. Right.
Yeah.
That application of like how do I bring a visual method into consulting, which is not a visual method, like you said, and still have it be meaningful.
Yeah.
Because I think there's this misconception, like I mentioned earlier, that if you're that MBA person or that tech person and you don't care about the visual aspect, it's because it doesn't matter. But
Yes. Yes. No, I think it matters. I think that the distinction is it's hard to measure the impact because it bleeds into everything.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like, we have clients that ask me like, like, what's the value of us? What's the value of like a data team or how do you price? I'm like, well, what's the value of like having data in every meetings? Like, I don't even know. 100%, 0%. It's hard to sort of like brand. I think very similarly, it's like a roots in the DNA of like every single thing your company puts its copy, how it speaks about itself, how your internal employees speak. It's like everything is around brand.
well, and it's a natural reflection of the journey of a company as well. So for me, the brand has evolved even in the 4 or 5 months that the company has existed officially or unofficially. in that the original idea was much less expansive than it is now.
Yeah.
And so that expansiveness has grown organically as I have grown the idea too. And the brand has changed to where like the use of color or whatever, or the use of motion in the like graphics that I post on LinkedIn is sort of an evolution of how I want people to perceive it. And the problem, as you said, is that you don't see results sort of at milestones. You see that from time to time and people recognize it, and you have to just have faith in the process.
It's a feeling too, but I don't know. It's something weird where as soon as you establish that, it greases the wheels for any time you go to post something or talk about. You've already made these decisions up front on like what your business is and what it isn't, and who you serve and who you don't, and why they should work with you. That's all branding.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and what we know, to kind of bring it all full circle, what we know now as we evolve in the consulting space and in the data and AI boutique space is that in order for our clients to see value and for them to see the iterative sort of methodology that we have to have now, we have to be able to tell that story. And my company exists because, as you said, the people that traditionally deliver that value don't know how to communicate it.
Yeah.
So the workshops are like the natural reflection of that, in that we have to be able to gamify and, sort of dumb down, so to speak, the message so that normal people can understand what we do and they can get the value of having good data or having AI tools or implementing them or whatever. The application of visuals and how that story comes across is how people get it.
You could totally go start a branding agency.
And this is something that like I want to make sure to clarify too, right? Because I have a passion for it and I care about it deeply, but I'm by no means an expert in branding. It's just something I take interest in, and I have a deep appreciation and respect for people that do this professionally.
Yeah.
Because it's a very underappreciated art, right? Like,
it's an afterthought, and people are brought it to clean it up.
And it's not something that you realize until you start your own company.
Yeah.
Where until you are trying to reflect the story of what you are and what you do, you don't even think about the brand. You're just like, oh, a brand is whatever. Like, people know that. Look, I just call my company.
For me, I think about brand as how other people would describe your business.
Yeah.
Or like the third derivative, like what does that person do? Or they work for this. What do they do again?
And
what do they say?
The interesting thing is that the details matter in branding.
Yeah.
And so anything from your name to how like your PowerPoints look, to how your like website looks, how it interacts with the sales cycle, how it like interacts with marketing, it seeps into everything.
Yeah.
And you don't realize that until you go out on your own.
Yeah.
And
until you realize someone else made that decision, or they didn't make a decision. It was just like the decision got made collectively.
Well, and for us smaller companies, the biggest challenge is that there's no separating all those things. Like in bigger companies, there's like the marketing department and sales department and other departments. For us, it's all the same. Like you and I have probably played all those roles collectively in some variety in the past. But the way that it comes together is through the visual, right? Like that's how people experience it. So I at least try to take a very, very particular and very detail-oriented approach to that.
Especially if you want to bill higher, it's got to look good.
Well, there's also that's another topic for another time, right? But obviously, polish is something that people expect at a certain price point.
Yeah.
So while expertise and delivery and capacity is certainly important and obviously something that our clients expect in every way, I expect something out of services that cost a certain price point.
Yes.
And our clients do too. Like they expect a certain level of, care put into something.
Yeah.
And for me, and this is true of anything in life, not just, my work and what I do, I put care into the things that I want to do well and want to make sure that it reflects. And the love and care that you put into your work reflects into how others end up seeing it and perceiving it. So the same principle I try to apply to my work. Like the love and care I put into my brand is because I care about it and it means something to me. And so because it means something to me, it'll mean something to other people too.
Okay, great. I think the last thing is just like plug where people can find you.
Yeah. So I am posting pretty frequently on LinkedIn. My name is David Cohen again. I'll post there pretty much every day for the next several weeks. then also be launching
Weeks, months, years.
Yeah, who knows? I'll just be forever posting on LinkedIn. And then my website is superpositionstrat.com. That's STRAT. And obviously, we also have a LinkedIn page. So primarily on LinkedIn for connecting with folks and kind of getting out there. So if any of you want to reach out and learn more, please do connect. I'm always happy to chat with more people.
Yeah, and if folks do go to your website, like what is one thing they should click on or one thing they should check out?
Yeah, so in the website, we have a use case library for the workshops. So a question that I often get is, you've asked it yourself, it's like, what do the workshops look like and what are they for? So we've created a Miro board where you can see the different use cases for the workshops and what they're for, and you've seen it.
Yeah.
So it has the different, types of workshops that we do. And one thing to keep in mind as you see those is that they're not the end all be all of what the workshops are. They're just the building blocks that we can then use for building those workshops into other parts.
Yeah.
So it's more to get inspiration for what the workshops would be than to be the final section. So if you have a chance to look at the website, any of you have a chance to look at the website, go look at that in particular.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, dude. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Great.